This call is being recorded.
So first, I'd like to welcome everyone tonight. My name is John Leader. I am the senior investment analyst for angelMD, and we are here with Jim Biggins, the CEO of Access Vascular, for an update call based on the syndicate we ran for Access Vascular last July, as well as discussing the new raise that he's begun that we're going to be launching escrow for on Monday to raise another syndicate. This second syndicate will be led by Dr. Arun Jagannathan, Dr. Carlos Hamilton, Dr. Ronnie Mimran, and Dr. Min Yoon. As for the past investors, you'll be hearing from me tomorrow in an email with the adjusted amount based upon the increase in valuation that Access Vascular has seen, what you would need to invest in this round in order to maintain your same proportionate ownership share in Access Vascular, but you're certainly welcome to put in more on top of that. The format for tonight's call is I'm going to hand it off now to Jim, who's kind of going to give a state of the company, discuss where they've come, the exciting achievements they've had, and the milestones ahead for this current raise, and then we'll open up the floor to questions for anyone that's got them. So without further ado, Jim, take it away.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. Much appreciated. It's hard to believe that it was last July that we first closed with a syndicate round from angelMD. So, certainly want to recognize and thank the leaders of that syndicate. That was it was a great opportunity for us to get involved with angelMD, and that's been a great resource to us, certainly. And then also certainly the investors involved in that as well. Great to have your support and belief in what we're doing. I'm happy to report that investment has been put to use and created some great results. So with this latest round, we were able to double the valuation based on the milestones we were able to achieve with that investment. So clearly a lot of value has been built. It's been built in the form of a number of different areas, including, I think, first and foremost, the clearance of our 4 French PICC line by the FDA. So a huge milestone for the company, the biggest one yet. So it's a validation of our technology and our team's effort getting this technology to potential patients. We've also scaled manufacturing to the point where we're just about ready to full-scale launch or manufacturing of our first product to support our pending limited commercial launch, which is going to happen in the next few months here. Again, another pivotal point for the company. We've built out a great team. There's actually 14 of us working here full-time now. Everyone from R&D engineers, quality regulatory personnel, and most recently a director of sales and marketing to help us sort our launch plan, which some of the details of which are in the package or the slide deck that we had sent out recently. In addition to that, we've also started some work on the drug-eluting capability of the technology, which represents another great opportunity for us to increase value based on a technology advantage that is not seen in the space currently. Happy to get into details on that technology or that piece of the technology as well. And we continue to build other products in the pipeline. So PICC is really our first beachhead. We're working on other versions. So we have a 4 French working on a dual lumen, which we are scheduled to submit by the end of this year. And then other venous access devices such as midlines. We're looking at midlines. We're looking at TIVCs and starting to explore CVCs. So lots of opportunity there, lots of promise. And I think maybe of the most interest certainly is the attraction and the attention that we're getting from potential strategics. We are having a lot of very positive interactions and interest from strategics, including an offer to acquire the company. Ultimately, along with the board, we had decided that at this point in time, given the contingencies of that offer and where we were positioned as a company to achieve those milestones in a relatively short period of time, we felt it was best that we put that offer aside, put that opportunity aside, and really focused on continuing to build the company. We feel like there's a lot more value to be had, and just because it was our first offer, we don't think it's going to be our last or our best. So looking forward, we are in the process of raising a $4 million round on a $25 million pre-money valuation. As of today, we have about $3 million of that that we'll be closing on in the next week or so. So we've had a strong interest from existing and new investors. So we were able to circle that money up relatively quickly. That money is going to be used for, again, our limited commercial launch and clinical use, which is happening in the third quarter of this year. Establish more of a foothold in specific niches where we think the technology adds the most value, and explore how the product will be used and really get some feedback from clinical sites or clinical use sites on the value that they see, so we can incorporate that into our more broadly focused commercial launch, which will really happen towards the end of this year and early next year. So that funding will be used to achieve that, certainly that critical milestone, but also a continued development of our pipeline, again, which includes the eluting capability that we're focused on. Additional technical milestones include a pre-submission to the FDA on that drug-eluting capability, which we plan to do in the next month or so. So with that, I'm happy to take questions or focus on specific areas where people have questions. John, did I miss anything? Is there anything else, anything you think I should elaborate on?
Yeah, I mean, my personal first questions is, obviously you guys had the opportunity for an acquisition, you chose to move on. So can you discuss the new plan of attack as far as building value into the company, where you think it can go, and the timeline to where the exit you're targeting could be?
Yeah, I certainly want to be careful here in promising any sort of exit, right? That's not something we want to do, or even provide loose guidance on, really. So, but what I can say is that when we started the company, we really felt like the best inflection point, the most natural inflection point, given today's M&A market, is really at the point of clinical use, right? So the larger companies, as you very well know or probably know, they want to reduce risk, right? They'd rather pay more and reduce risk. And so the acquirer that approached us is really behind the eight ball. They are a player in the venous access space, but they don't, they have certain gaps in their portfolio. And I think they were trying to get ahead of any other potential competition for the technology. And so I think although we wanted to entertain what the offer could be, we ultimately know that the best inflection point for an exit is post-use, right? Post-clinical use. We have all kinds of great preclinical data. We got clearance from the FDA, but ultimately that's the point where we reduce all of the risk for the strategic. And again, the way that these large companies think or look at risk, they want to reduce as much risk as possible, and they'd rather pay more later. And that certainly went into our consideration. We have a lot of confidence in the technology. Obviously, we've seen it through clearance. We have all the data and have seen the technology, evolve over time and understand it quite well. So our risk profile for achieving these milestones, I think we look at that risk a lot differently than the strategic. So we felt it was well worth raising some more money and achieving these milestones, one of which was clearance, by the way. So that milestone has been, or that contingency has been resolved. And so, without promising anything or committing to anything, certainly after clinical use, it makes a lot more sense for an acquisition at that point.
Okay, thank you. And anyone else that has questions, feel free to jump in and fire away at any time.
Jim, it's Arun. I just wanted you to just kind of touch a little briefly regarding the development of potential HD devices. I know hemodialysis is an area that a couple of my colleagues that have been involved with the syndicate had some questions about where ABR was going with regards to that. If you could address that, please.
Yeah, certainly. So, when we first started the company, the number of clinical uses of this material is expansive. And anytime you put something into the vasculature, it's going to thrombose and it's going to have some sort of reaction. So the number of opportunities we have are numerous. Certainly HD catheters was one area we looked at from the beginning. The hesitation there for us has always been the size of the market, right? There's this whole fistula first initiative. And so in addition to that, the expense and the regulatory hurdle associated with that device was a lot higher than it was for the PICC line. And so I think the way to look at how we're building out the portfolio and how we're approaching product proliferation is really the intent was to leverage the PICC line, right? So it had the lowest regulatory hurdles and it still had a great market, but also allowed us to get the material in front of the FDA. And now that it's in front of them, the questions regarding the material itself have, for the most part, been addressed. And so I think the risk of going after different spaces and our ability to do that quickly has been resolved. And so that doesn't answer the question regarding the size of the market. And so that it's only about a $300 million market, I think globally. And so we still have some hesitation to focus on that specific target, the HD catheters. But I will say we have had a lot of inbound calls from 4 major strategics primarily regarding working with us on an HD catheter. So that has our heads turned a little bit. So all this to say that we're not committed to doing an HD catheter yet, but it is rapidly approaching the getting high on the priority list, primarily because the strategics are interested in it. And I strongly believe it's an area that our technology will significantly help in terms of all the clinical complications and issues associated with HD catheters. So high on our radar, getting higher on our radar, but not something that we are strongly or 100% committed to at this point. We still have some due diligence to do in terms of the market and the attractiveness to us as a startup, given all the opportunity we have. So hopefully that answers your question, Arun. I'm happy to elaborate.
No, great answer. That covers it.
Hey, Jeff, this is Carlos Hamilton. And listen, how did you come up with or whoever designed this, come up with the idea to create this material that wouldn't interact with the blood and be so thrombogenic?
Yeah, so I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version. It's actually quite a long story, but so my background is in polymer engineering. Worked for companies like Medtronic and Boston Scientific for a number of years. And I think it was through that experience or through the exposure to those other products with a limited selection of materials, a relatively limited selection of materials, primarily because of the regulatory path to change those materials. That in combination with my exposure to a class of materials known as hydrogels, which this falls into, that got me thinking about using a hydrogel for a structural application. And then I also shadowed physicians in and around the Boston area for 18 months looking for unmet or unmet needs within that clinical setting. And I was really surprised at how often and frequently I heard frustration with venous access devices, specifically PICCs. And it was a lot from nurses, but also some interventionalists. And so I kind of married those two things and said, well, here is a material or class of materials, hydrogels, known to be bioinert. Why can't we form a catheter out of this material to resolve this very serious and costly problem? And so that's the genesis of the idea really came from a combination of knowing that there's not a lot of materials that would be good in this application, and having the material knowledge to say, okay, we can redesign this material in specific ways to address these problems. And so that's really where it started.
Thanks for explaining that. One other thing, I believe somewhere in one of the decks that I saw, there's mention of not using a sheath to get the catheter in, and I'm just wondering how do you envision getting that to work without a sheath? I understand the less traumatic and it's bigger diameter and all that, but
yeah,
how do you get something through there without a sheath?
Yeah, good question. So, let's start with the material itself. So, the thing that's really interesting about this is the need for a non-thrombogenic material is very clear. How we got there with our particular material is very unique in the sense that it's not a thermoplastic. So we get a bunch of new characteristics that we can leverage for different needs. And so because our material is, once it comes dehydrated and it hydrates to include about 50% water, 50% polymer. And so we're able to manipulate the characteristics of the material so we can actually, when you open the package, for instance, if you look at our 4 French, we can provide it as a 3 French diameter. It can be inserted, and then it will hydrate to a known diameter, both ID and OD. So that, combined with the fact that it's extremely lubricious. So there's no coating. It's really just the nature of the material that makes it so lubricious that it can pass through. It can pass through the very small insertion sites. And so this needs to be verified in a clinical setting, but I can tell you that the ovine models that we used have significantly thicker and difficult to penetrate skin, and we proved and showed time and time again that we can just insert this right over a wire, and again, the lubricity combined with the column stiffness allows us to slide it right in. And so again, it needs to be proven clinically, but we think there are a tremendous amount of advantages for us to not use and introduce it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, you can pretty much get a 3 French anything through something, so that's pretty cool. Let me ask you this: have you ever thought about using this material somehow on stents? Because that's a real issue with them, and so anyway, and then I'll stop asking questions.
Yeah, like I alluded to in the beginning, there are a tremendous amount of applications for the material. We have to be selective of which ones we go after, and we can't get distracted by all the promise. But, there are a number of applications that we are very interested in pursuing. And once we, isolate which ones make the most sense for us, we'll pursue those.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess, just to add to that, we don't want to get distracted by the shiny ball, and that goes for HD catheters as well. Lots of interest, lots of potential, but let's focus and figure out where we add the most value with the least amount of investment dollars.
Jim, one question I have on when you talked about the pathway to commercialization being so critical. Can you talk about the experience on the management team of taking a product from development to market, and what areas in industries they've had success in with that?
Yeah, Absolutely. So we've taken a number of different products. Everyone has different levels of experience taking it from concept to commercialization. I've personally been in endoscopy quite a bit in ocular applications, taking things from concept through commercialization on a number of different applications. In that space, we have management team members that have taken products through in the interventional cardiology space, guide wires, guide catheters, that type of thing. And then we have sealants. We've taken a few sealants from concept to commercialization, early stage launch to scaling. So a number of different experiences that have gotten and successfully ramped products.
Hi, Jim. This is Min calling. Can you talk about the strategy for sales and marketing and market penetration once you start after the production?
Yeah, certainly. This is one of the things we're going to be focusing on in the next few months, and so I think it is going to be critical for us to ensure we're focused in the right areas. There are some behemoths in the space of PICC lines, namely BARD, and so we don't want to go in there and poke the bear. If you look at the slide presentation that we sent out recently, or I think John circulated, we're really focused on finding a beachhead, right? Finding a specific subsegment of the market where no one else competes, right? We're offering something that differentiates us from the likes of BARD, from angiodynamics, that will give us our own niche, and that we can say, we are the PICC line for XYZ complications, and really proving that out clinically, right? So that our first step is going to be proving this clinically. We'll do probably up to 30 patients towards the third quarter of this year, and we're going to focus on probably two different subsegments, the TPN population as well as DVA patients, so difficult venous access, and prove out our clinical use. So, and then leverage that information to go to other hospitals and look to do economic studies with them, right? So a lot of our value proposition, or at least we believe at this point, a lot of our value proposition is going to be in those healthcare economic stories. So the more specific we can be in the patient population, and the more differentiation we can offer in terms of outcomes and cost savings or cost avoidance, is going to be critical to our adoption of the technology. And so, we theoretically we could go out and try to sell, throughout the U.S. As early as the third quarter of this year. But I think we really need to hone in on the full story and how we differentiate, and not go and try to boil the ocean in terms of competition, right? Really differentiate ourselves, build that story of healthcare economics, and leverage that for paid pilot studies and white papers and podium talks from key opinion leaders. I think that's really where we differentiate. The real story for us isn't solely reducing thrombosis. We want to prove clinically that we can almost eliminate thrombosis from the complications associated with PICC lines. I know that sounds like a very bold statement, but our preclinical results show the potential to do that. And I think we want to be, our ideal scenario is that we're a premium-based product that shows enough value to clinicians that we can command a higher price based on the performance of the device. Does that help? Can I elaborate more? Are there areas that are unclear? I'm happy to go into more detail.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, then I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up this evening. Thank you all for coming and listening, and Jim for sharing an update on the company. Just to reiterate, for those that joined late, those that are past investors will be receiving an email from me tomorrow recapping the investment that you would need to make in order to maintain your ownership share. That, of course, is not required. You can do more or you can not do it at all. But we'll have that information for you. And for those new potential investors on the call, we will be opening the syndicate on Monday live for investment. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a good night.